Hello, I'm Aksha Dhiman and I'm an Avanti fellow. I'm 16 years old and I'm currently studying in Government Senior Secondary School in Rishikesh. I love studying biology and I want to become a gynecologist. Welcome to Avanti, a show where incredible women who are at the top of their fields share the obstacles they had to overcome to get there. Here's our host, Vandana Goyal.
Noorain Khan grew up as the daughter of Pakistani immigrants in Grand Rapids, Michigan. With a physician father and a mother who was a former middle school teacher, education and faith were the cornerstones of her home. After earning her degrees from Rice University and Yale Law School, Noorain embarked on a career that spanned corporate law, nonprofits, and public policy. Her passion for social justice and community work led her to her roles at Teach for All and the Ford Foundation. Noorain's dedication to her work is also evident in her historic appointment as the first Muslim American National Board President of Girl Scouts USA. Hi, Noorain. Welcome.
Hi, Vandana. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've read a lot about you, read your resume, your incredible achievements, and I'm so excited to share them with our audience and our girls in particular. Your father grew up in pre-partition Pakistan as one of 11 siblings. Through an affirmative action program, he was able to study medicine in Lahore before moving to America to become a physician. Your grandfather was also an educator. He was a principal. And your own father fought really hard for his sisters to be educated, which at the time was really unusual. Why was education so important to your family, and how did it change your lives?
Education was truly important, both for my father's side and my mother's side of the family, which was from Lahore and Punjabi. I would say on my father's side, because my grandfather was an educator, he was able to travel and be exposed to different people and communities and opportunities, and knew for his own children that that would be a priority. And my father and his brothers were certainly the beneficiaries of that. And I think as my father experienced his own education, he understood that what was available to him ought to be available to his sisters for them to live out their fullest potential. And on my mother's side of the family, my grandmother was a widow and was of limited means herself in terms of the possibility of working. She was widowed in her 30s with 6 children.
Wow.
And so it was really important for her children to not just be educated, but to have the very best education possible. She wasn't able to pursue her education in that way, so that meant her children would. And that was very important for them.
Was there ever any resistance that they faced in the process of educating their sisters and their daughters?
I think certainly on my dad's side of the family, there was obvious resistance. There were cultural limitations. There were family members who had feelings about women being out of the home to pursue further education. And I think that means you either feel much more determined, and my family members, I felt like were fought for this possibility and pursued it, felt obligated to do that. But the resistance happens everywhere in all society. So it's a really big challenge. And you have to say, this is what we're going to do and what we believe in and what's important to us.
So even though you were born and raised in the U.S.,
That's
you
right.
grew up in a multi-language home.
Yep.
You spent your growing up years going back and forth between the U.S. and Pakistan. How did this upbringing influence the way you looked at the world while you were growing up?
The experience of being American, but getting to visit other countries and especially spend extended time with family in Pakistan during vacations profoundly shaped my life. It exposed me to different people, different thinking, different financial and economic circumstances and realities. I built friendships across language barriers. And I think it makes me wish for an experience like that for my own kids. It felt so sacred and beautiful. And it actually is really hard to replicate as soon as you get along further in generations. And I have such nostalgia for those childhood memories and those shared experiences.
One of the things I think you said was that your parents always told you that you were destined for greatness, which is so beautiful. What impact did that have on your confidence as a child?
it's less about a belief that you are great, but more about a belief that you can do what you set your mind to, that you are capable, and you're just much more likely to believe you can do something if someone else, certainly as a child, tells you can do something. So I think it had a really big impact on me setting big ambitions for myself. And it allowed me to be more resilient during the inevitable times where things don't work out or don't work out in the ways you wish they did.
Did you ever have a time when that self-belief was shaken up by something that happened in your life? Can you share a specific story or an
Yeah.
example?
Do I have one example? I have 100 examples. And in my college search, for example, when I was applying for university, I applied to a lot of schools across the country, and I didn't get into some of them. And some of them were just financially just out of the picture. And I think probably when admission season happened, I was pretty disappointed. I thought I would have more or different options. And then the school I went to Rice University in Houston, Texas, was exactly the right place for me. I had so many opportunities. It was such a important experience and exposure for me. It was so different than where I grew up in Michigan. So it really blew my world open. You don't have that perspective in the moment. I mean, I think the number of things that didn't work out for me are endless. But I have loved ones and friends. And even today, we have a friends group text or we have other supports for encouragement. You need to build that for yourself too. And I think they're really vital.
I love that you're talking about ending up in a place that you didn't hope for.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't plan for. Just yesterday, I was in one of our classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
We have over almost 200 students actually preparing for one of the most rigorous exams in the world, entrance to the IITs,
That's
the
right.
Indian Institute of Technology. And, these kids work 17 hours a day to prepare for this exam. And I was sitting in the room with them and just thinking, how stressful and how much pressure is this to think that I am working this hard for this one outcome?
Yep.
And the one thing I told them is that if you don't get into an IIT, you will end up where you are meant to be, right?
Vandana, I so appreciate that. That so resonates for me. And I'll just say that later in life. So first of all, you don't have that perspective when you're preparing for something that's important. And you can and should prepare to do your very best. But I'll say the most thoughtful leaders, really creative people, savvy people, strategic people, and effective people really had a diverse set of experiences. I can surmise that it wasn't a particular test score graduating from a particular school, but it was folks that work hard.
But you did experience incredible success even academically. So you went to Rice, you won a Rhodes Scholarship, one of the most prestigious scholarships in the world. You went on to pursue an MPhil in migration studies at Oxford, and then you ended up at Yale Law. Can you tell me a little bit about what were the mindsets and the skills that you applied to being able to achieve that kind of success?
So I'll say I didn't have parents that were educated in the U.S. system. I have parents who are really supportive and have a lot of belief in me and obviously support me in many ways, including financially, during my education. But I had to do a lot of my own research, right? I had to understand the landscape of how you get into a school or how you pursue opportunities outside of schools, how you make the best use of your time. And that's Googling and book research. It's meeting people who you aspire to be like and asking for their advice and wisdom.
What I'm talking about, I think, and what you're talking about is ownership over your own learning.
Yes.
Right?
Yep, that's right.
Which many of our young people have to do when they don't have those kinds of supports.
Absolutely. And you also do lean on people. And I think it's a lot about connection. And it's about finding your way into spaces that you want to be in. So if you really later in life want to be an elected official, finding an internship to be in one of those offices as a young person, you will at that time probably be getting someone's coffee and maybe preparing someone with notes on what they're about to do. But you use that time, you do that work to the very best of your abilities. For young people especially, it can be intimidating to ask for the time of someone whose wisdom and advice you seek. I would really encourage folks, and this is something I certainly do, to ask specific questions. I noticed you did this and this. What was your thinking behind that? I noticed you did this and this. I thought that was really inspiring. What was the hardest part about it on your side? I'm sharing advice, obviously, for a young person, and I'm reminding myself of advice I use to this day.
One of the things that I find really interesting about you is that with your academic background, you could have really done anything. You started off working for 3 years as a lawyer, but you spent all of your spare time volunteering
Yeah.
for the Girl Scouts,
Yeah.
I believe.
Yep.
What made you leave law and actually pursue this as your career, your profession?
Well, I think a little bit less about leaving law and more like I was a visitor in the law for a period of time. I think I always knew I wanted to do something public-minded and wanted to do something purposeful and in service of others. And I know people have that calling, and whether they do that in their spare time or professionally or personally, there's all different ways people respond to an innate calling to be a part of something bigger and to build.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that resonates for you. Exactly. I think for me, I loved being a lawyer at my law firm. I think I learned a lot about excellence, people who were doing work at the very highest levels, very high caliber, who are very hard workers. And, there's only a finite number of hours in your day. And when I found that I was drawn to, for personal reasons, doing work that was impactful, including a lot of work for the Girl Scouts at that time, working on the Girl Scouts' 100th anniversary in 2012. It came to a point where I was really looking forward to that in a different way. And it was really clear to me, like, that should be my day job. And so I think I just reached the threshold of recognition that this is a lot of time and it's bringing me a lot of joy and purpose. So I think I was always going to do that, but a day-to-day reflection of what that looked like in my early years of my career led me to make that choice sooner rather than later.
And even before joining the Girl Scouts, much earlier, you worked at a women's rights NGO in Karachi
That's
as
right.
an intern. So connect these dots for me. There's obviously something about girls and women and working for their rights, for their empowerment that is very deep and personal for you. Where did that come from?
It's so funny. I always found myself drawn to organizations related to women and girls, especially when I was a girl. When I was in middle school, I was a part of a local group that thought about women's depictions in media, for example. And I think that's really interesting because in the 1990s, there was a discourse that we take for granted today about women in magazines. And that was a conversation I was a part of as like a 6th and 7th and 8th grader. And then later in life, in college, I was a women's studies major, which really was the big picture, women, gender, and sexuality studies. Who are we as women? It felt natural for me to think about working in that space, especially because that was my major in college. And so I had the opportunity to work at a women's rights NGO called Shirkat Gah in Karachi. And that was really important for me because I had no family in Karachi. I'd actually never been in Karachi until I landed there. I lived in a house with a lot of other young people, many of whom were of Pakistani origin, but some of whom were not, who were really excited to make contributions and learn. And I began to love Karachi as a city. I just think it's a port city. It's so interesting. It's so cosmopolitan. The food was amazing. And my Urdu was always okay, but not great. When I went to grad school after that, I ended up finally studying Urdu properly and learning how to read it. I could only speak it prior to that. So the call to work in women's rights was always present for me. And it began as personal, like how I see myself and my peers, and began to extend to seeing patterns. The patriarchy exists well beyond my own experiences and borders, and you find how it self-replicates in communities that are not in dialogue with each other. And I feel really like it's one of my jobs in life to work on that, and certainly not from a perspective in the global South, where I know better. We in the West experience the same things and we have to own that. But I was really proud to learn from sisters in other places who were experiencing similar challenges.
I'm so deeply connecting to what you're saying because I moved to Mumbai. My family grew up in the north of India. We have very little family here. But I said, I'm going to go to India and I'm going to go to a place where I've never been before, where I don't have family, and I'm going to make India
Yeah,
my own and form my own, idea of India rather than through my
that's right.
parents. So that's so beautiful and it
I
really
think that's
shapes
so
you.
powerful, Vandana. And to speak to what you're doing, you're making a contribution.
So another connection, in my 5-year-old's classrooms, they say connection when you say something else.
Hmm.
I think we were both Girl Scouts
That's right.
when we were kids, which is kind of a quintessential part of the American upbringing, is to sell the cookies, to earn the badges.
That's right.
I think I was not as good of a Girl Scout as you. I'm
You were a
guessing.
great Girl Scout, Vandana. Look what you're doing today. I think that tells us all you need to know.
Beautiful. And how important was the Girl Scouts in shaping you as a child and then going on to becoming a young woman?
I always say that aside from my family and my faith, Girl Scouts was the single most important shaper of me as a young person and had a profound impact on my trajectories in life. And that really looked differently throughout the arc of my Girl Scouting experience, beginning in second grade through when I earned our highest award, the Gold Award. So as a girl, a huge part of our experience is like learning, growing, having a caring adult in your world that's not your teacher or your parents who's invested in you. I got to make new friends. And that friend group from my troop remained intact through when we graduated from high school. That was really important for me. And I was part of a group at my local Girl Scouting council called Face It. And that group was high schoolers who wrote and conducted workshops. And we were mentored by college women. But something really specific about that group was it was at our council level, which meant that I met girls from all over my community, people who I would never have the opportunity on a day-to-day basis based on my pre-existing life to build relationships with. Not only did we exist together and work on projects together, but we had to learn how to be together. And by that, I mean really serious issues of equity and diversity. Like my first diversity training was with Girl Scouts in like the late 1990s. And lastly, I'll share my Gold Award project related to fundraising for my mosque in my community and fundraising from a foundation. Now that you look at what I did then and what I do now, there's a direct line there. And I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing today with that experience.
Yeah, I'm thinking about so many things, but you mentioned a couple of times the influence that your faith has had on you. You chose your project as a Girl Scout to raise money for your local mosque. You talked about
Yep,
faith being a big influence. And I think, especially in Eastern traditions, Eastern cultures, faith is such a deep part of how we connect as a community.
absolutely.
So, can you talk a little bit about how your faith has shaped you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a Muslim. I'm Muslim American, and I would just say, obviously, that shapes my day to day in terms of practice, from praying to fasting to whatever else. I've also performed Hajj. I've done, those things are really important to me.
Wow.
But it's also my purpose, right? The big why in my life is answered by what I see as my purpose, which is contributing to this world. And one of the things I so appreciate about my mosque growing up was there was just one in our community in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which meant that people came from all different backgrounds, whether it was Black Muslims who were born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, to folks who were immigrants of really different countries of origin, community of reverts. Like you just kind of like, it was another space that allowed me to have something shared with people. I'm excited as a parent now to be able to share that with my kids.
We were growing up in the States. We were all Indians.
Yes.
Right. So
Yep.
we had Indian friends from all over the country. And I never identified it as a specific part of India, right? We were just
Yeah.
Indian.
Yeah.
And then, we moved to India and it was like, where are you from? Which part
Exactly.
of the state?
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful connector and so important to see beyond some of the
Oh,
bounds
totally.
that we
And
draw.
Vandana, it resonates for me, even just you speaking, because many of my closest friends, I talked about like my Muslim community friends, but, my South Asian friends and certainly my South Asian girlfriends are just so important to me. And we share a worldview that is certainly relates to faith, but is well beyond faith, whether it's like how our parents think or what we do or what we cook or how we parent. And there'll be cross-cutting cleavages of identity in our own lives, but seek out people with whom you share a hobby or a background or whatever else. You would be surprised, but don't rely on just one of your identities. That's one piece of advice that has served me so, so well.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit. In July of 2023, you made history by becoming the first South Asian Muslim American to become the national board president of the Girl Scouts of the USA. That's a big title. It's long and it sounds important. What does it feel like to head one of the largest organizations in the world for girls?
It's obviously very humbling and such an honor, but it is so exciting. I think there is so much opportunity and potential for women and girls in this country. We know that when you talk about representation and pipeline issues and other challenges, there's a lot of work to be done. But in this role, I travel the country and I meet young people all the time. It's our responsibility to make this a world that is prepared for their incredible leadership. We, as Girl Scouting in the U.S., have 1.7 million members because Girl Scouts of the USA also has troops across the world at military bases and in places outside of the U.S. that are very connected to the U.S. And I work in partnership with the national CEO of Girl Scouts of the USA, Bonnie Barczykowski, who is a great, great partner. And I'm the governance leader of our organization, which means I chair the National Board of Girl Scouts of the USA. And I'm also the chief volunteer of our movement. And not only are we a membership movement, girls are members of Girl Scouts, but we have volunteers across the country who raise their hand and say, I will give of my time and my treasure to show up for girls and invest in girls. And I'm really proud to be a part of that legacy because they serve as troop leaders, they serve as board members, they serve as cookie parents. And I'm really grateful and proud to be a part of that lineage as well.
It's amazing to be able to take leadership in partnership with your CEO from a place that has a great foundation.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Because
right.
you're not thinking about the kinks that need to be worked out and starting from scratch, but you're starting from a place of strength and you can move forward. What are some of the things that you are trying to change to adapt to how we live, where we live, the time we live in?
I feel incredibly grateful to be building on a really powerful legacy. We've got 50 million alum. We have the number of Girl Scout alums who are represented in Congress as astronauts in different places of power and influence for women. Astounding. But then we're kind of at a crossroads societally. A lot of things are changing and have changed. And so it's important for us to think about families today and what girls need, what opportunities they desire. I'm really proud to have led and chaired our work on racial equity and diversity and inclusion in our movement, and really thinking about Girl Scouts as a place for all girls to feel like they belong and have outcomes that are on par with each other. And one thing I'm really excited about is an effort called the Girl Scout Experience Box, which basically packages everything a troop leader would need for meetings for a year. All the work for badge work, all the guidance, all the planning. I mean, there's like so many different programs, Vandana, but obviously something that young people are experiencing today. They've always experienced this, but we've never been so vocal about it, is mental health and wellness. And, more recently, Girl Scouts has launched patchwork on mental wellness. And it's focused on self-care and building healthy habits and safely exploring their feelings and seeking support in a safe and intimate setting. I always like to think that we are there for girls in this moment of crisis. Actually, young people are certainly experiencing mental health crisis situation. And then we're there for the world, because when Girl Scouts unleash their talents, they work on projects and take on things that make the world a better place.
Well, I'm just thinking you're like a leader for a community of 1.7 million people.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
And what does it take to create that kind of change?
I think it's actually about the listener that you have to become first, right? And so a huge part of my job is taking different inputs and just being open to all sorts of feedback and reflections and insights. And then the leadership it really takes partnership. Like I said, we're a membership organization. We've got this incredibly robust, inspiring delegate body that represents our members at a enterprise level. They meet every 3 years. And then I've got my board members and management at GSUSA. And then it just takes prioritization. Which things are going to really set the table for the other things we want to do? So that's really how I've approached the last 8 months and then looking ahead during my term.
And I'm just thinking as you're talking, Girl Scouts is probably one of the first organizations in the US, but even globally, that's talked about girls in STEM, right?
Yep.
But when you look at what's happening in the workforce,
Yep.
right, the number of young women who choose to be engineers, who choose to go into technical fields, continues to hit a wall. So what does an organization like yours need to do to support and enable girls to overcome some of those hurdles? And what are those hurdles in your mind?
It's really clear based on our data that girls want to do STEM. They want to explore science, data science, coding, cybersecurity, the range of issues. In the first year that our cybersecurity badges were offered to girls, Girl Scouts earned 100,000 cybersecurity badges. So we know there's an appetite for it. Between 2017 and 2021, GSUSA launched 100 new STEM badges, and Girl Scouts earned 3.5 million STEM badges. Just think about that. That's badges. That's not even every activity it takes to earn a badge. And that's across age levels. So you can get a Daisy, you can get a 5-year-old, a 15-year-old interested in this work. And I think our formula is pretty simple. We provide an accepting environment, we provide supportive adults, and then we provide a variety of fun and hands-on STEM experiences. And the experiences could be badge work. It could also be travel and other kinds of powerful experiential learning. And that results in girls who see the value of STEM and who have the interest and the confidence and the competence to do it, but also to be leaders within the sector. You know, that data from 2017 to 2021, we are not far along from seeing the impact of that investment.
When you can see yourself as an engineer and when you can see yourself as a product designer, you can see yourself as an astronaut, then it's just intuitive, right? Of course
Absolutely.
I can do this.
Yeah. The majority of NASA's astronauts today are Girl Scout alums.
Oh.
More than the majority. Those people were Girl Scouts well before we had this new phase of STEM work. So that tells you the kinds of focus, exploration, and support may not even have to be subject matter expertise, but those spaces allow girls to rise in a really particular way.
That's amazing. I wanted to ask one final question because you mentioned you worked in the White House.
Yeah.
Which I think our young people would be really interested to hear about. What was that experience like? How does working in politics and government actually connect to the work that you're doing in Girl Scouts and beyond?
I worked on the National Economic Council at the White House, which really has very expansive scope related to everything from labor to economic justice issues to climate issues, even associated with economics. So it was a very formative experience. I really want to understand where decisions are made, how they're made, and how people can activate for power and influence. And so I'm so proud of the work I did on infrastructure and roads and bridges and broadband in the US. I think it was very powerful context for me in the broader purpose of my life, which is making the world a more just place for all people. I'm often somewhere without any background or really haven't done that before. My parents never worked in the White House. And I know people come to those spaces having had those experiences or having the benefit of people in your family who've done it before. And I just would say you have just as much to offer being a new person because you have new and different insights. And you may learn how things work, but you have something, you find that thing that would be valuable to other people that you bring to the table.
And all of these things that you've done, the Ford Foundation, Girl Scouts, the White House, in the backdrop, you're the mother of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old.
That's right.
Which is incredible. Have you ever felt like just giving up?
First of all, I love my kiddos. I think it's so fun to be a mom, and it's so challenging to be a mom. And having that reality, not painting it out to be some montage of absolutely perfect, joyful moments. I mean, there's like 50 tantrums a day, as Vandana, you may probably know. That's a reality of it. But what I do have is a very powerful support system, whether it's the grandparents in my kid's life who are warm and embracing and engaging and present, to my spouse who is just my biggest champion and supporter and has a lot of belief in what's possible for me and understands that he believes he has a role in supporting me. And I'm so grateful for that.
And how important do you think it is for kids to see their mother also pursuing their passion? Now, their passion can be, manifest in many different ways. It doesn't have to necessarily be going into an office. But how do you think that influences them?
Oh, it's so powerful, Vandana. Like, my kids are so proud. I try to tell them every time where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do, who I'm going to see. And I mean, like, they kind of don't understand things, but I feel like they do understand that. And then I'll just add, like, I imagine the kinds of conversations I'm going to have with them as they grow up. We are only parents to small children for a short period of time. And then you have a different relationship with the young people in your life. I believe that my kids would want me to flourish and experience different things. And I also know that at different points, I'm going to make different choices about prioritization and being present for them. That is important to me. But I know that that's not a solo responsibility for me, that my spouse, Sabeel, thinks about that every day too. And so it doesn't just rest on my shoulders as a mother, but we think together as parents.
Beautiful. This has been so inspiring to talk to you. Thank you for sharing. We've covered such a wide range of your life, your story, your experiences. Thank you for sharing so openly. I'm incredibly inspired and wondering how you have done it all. And you have so much left to do.
I'm talking to someone who makes those same choices too. And I think that it was a really fun opportunity to take a step back and think big picture, and in service of Avanti fellows who are doing amazing things today and will be doing amazing things looking ahead. I think that's the most powerful reason to say yes to something like this. So I'm really proud and grateful to share my story and reflections.
Thank you so much. Yashika is a 17-year-old student from a rural district in Karnataka in the south of India. She loves math and hopes to pursue engineering as a career. She wants to know, did you always want to work in nonprofits, and what inspired you to join in?
Well, I really want to thank Yashika for that question. It's really a great one. And I would say, I don't think I always knew I wanted to work at a nonprofit. I think early in my life, I benefited from the work of a lot of other nonprofits, including Girl Scout. And I probably thought, later in life, I would love to be more involved. But as my professional life evolved, it became clear that the things I was good at, whether it was organizationally or as a lawyer or in terms of strategy, would really be work that could be done at a nonprofit. And so I think I didn't lead with knowing the sector. I led with knowing that this place in the world really made a big contribution. I thought it was important. And I knew that there was a lot of things I loved learning about in school, and I saw that out. And then I saw the match later in life.
I love that. And I love that you can discover it later on.
Yes.
That's one of the things we try to talk about with our students, is that you don't have to know, or you can start in one place and go to another place, and that's good.
It's good because you might learn and bring different qualities to that place, given all the other exposure and experience you have. And so while it's really important to have subject matter expertise, the resilience, the decision-making, the relationships, that's all just stuff you learn elsewhere.
Yeah, and you are a lawyer, you're a women's study major, you are a philanthropist, you are working in the Girl Scouts, you worked in the White House. So you are a collection of all of those things. You are not a single one of them, and they can be too. Thanks so much to Noorain for being on the show. If you enjoyed that episode, do tune in every week as we sit down with more remarkable women. The podcast is hosted by Avanti Fellows, a nonprofit that breaks the cycle of poverty in India by providing access to post-secondary education for students from underserved communities. With this show, we aim to inspire thousands of young people with these real-life stories of incredible female leaders who have made a lasting impact on their industries. To learn more about the work we do, visit www.avantifellows.org.